This is Nitin Dahad with EE Times. I'm here today with Satya Gupta, who's the president of the VLSI Society of India, and actually he has a long career in the Indian semiconductor industry. Hello, Satya.
Good morning, Nitin. Glad to be here and talking to you after basically a long period.
Yes, it's been some 20 years, but so tell me, what's VLSI Society of India and what keeps you busy with that?
So VLSI Society of India is a 40-year-old organization which was set up to develop basically education and the research ecosystem in VLSI design and semiconductors in India. It was set up by basically some legendary figures like Vishwani Agrawal, Prabhakaran. They were basically early pioneers in basically semiconductor industry in India, and VLSI Society does basically a couple of large conferences. VLSI Design Conference has become one of the largest platform in the world for VLSI design and semiconductor. Not just in India, it is one of the largest conference in the world. And then we do a couple of smaller conferences, workshop, work with basically institute in terms of basically study in the VLSI design semiconductor, research, employment opportunities, connecting them to industry, as well as curriculum development and other activities.
Yeah, and I think I've seen whenever every year somebody tells me, oh, I'm going to present or I'm going to go to the VLSI. So it has become quite a sort of a part of the annual calendar for many companies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now let's talk. We talked a little bit about India's role in the global ecosystem and how obviously it's been very good as a development center, but I think there's more to it, and I think so you've got some thoughts on where we should be driving India and around the talent and the product ecosystem. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So India is basically, if you look at the semiconductor industry, India is typically seen as probably second largest place where the chips are designed for basically global semiconductor companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at a bigger picture, India has become one of the largest market for electronics products, right? Today, basically, we consume about $210 billion of electronics products today. And if we basically project these numbers to the 100th independence year of India in 2047, it could become as big as $4 trillion electronics product market. Right?
Right.
So now basically the aspiration of India is to basically serve this very large market using the basic strength it has. So India has developed very good strength in electronics manufacturing, and obviously it has a big market, and also it has a very large talent pool, right? So taking all these things together, if we can basically become a destination of, let's say, 50% of this $4 trillion market, the products to be done by domestic companies and domestic brands, I think that will not only create a strong economic value, but it will also, for India, but also it will basically help in spreading the supply chain across the world to more trusted sources, so that basically rest of the world can get basically their products done in India and basically supplied from India.
Yeah, and I think it's about a lot of countries are talking about resilience in the supply chain. So it's not just depending on one
Yep.
sort of area. Is that right?
Absolutely. So it gives a and the local market gives it the strength, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just like China had a great local market and then they became basically a product destination, India can basically help in diversifying the basically supply chain resilience, so that basically if something happens to one region for whatever reason, natural, political or any other thing, then basically the world supply chain is still secure.
And I think one of the things that we talked about in the pre-discussion about this is you used examples, for example, creating product companies like Apple, but also like the strength of countries like China, with sort of domination of sort of things like mobile phone market in India, for example.
Yeah. So, see, generally it is easier to basically illustrate the point through a mobile phone because everybody understands that better, right? So today, India is probably consumes overall mobile phone market will be about $30 billion, right? And about 75% of that market is basically owned by Chinese brands, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, Xiaomi, and so on and so forth,
Yes.
right? And rest is basically Apple and Samsung mostly. That's constitute almost 95% to 97% of the market, right? Now, I think that large market share by China also create dependency for large semiconductor companies for them to be basically that China is basically their biggest market, right?
Yes,
if you take
correct.
Qualcomm probably basically about 50% or more of their revenue depends on basically China,
Correct.
right? Now, in the basically growing geopolitical situation and diversification, it will be the best basically if some of that dependency can be basically reduced and collaboration between basically companies like Qualcomm and basically some large businesses of India can create basically let's say one or two mobile phone brands which can take basically 10 to 15% of the market. It will help basically India obviously because we are doing more products, but it will help the companies like Qualcomm and rest of the supply chain to basically not to be dependent on single geography or basically single country and provide a basically better and stable resilient supply chain.
What about India specific? What are the challenges in India right now to have your more of the product companies being built here?
Yeah, so when I say product company, there are two types of the products. One is basically system level products, which are basically things like mobile phone, Wi-Fi router, and so on and so forth. And another are basically chip level products, which are done by basically typically fabulous product companies, other than few IDMs, right? So I think for both the ecosystems to grow, once we start doing more electronics products, right, that will automatically generate demands for semiconductor components, right? Because then your decision about what chip goes into what product is basically decision which is locally made, procurement is locally done. That creates the market for semiconductor fabless chip, and ultimately it creates basically market for also semiconductor manufacturing companies which are coming to India, right? So fab is like a factory. If you don't have any products to build, then basically factory will not succeed, right? So we need to build this vertical chain, system level product, chip level products to basically ATMP to foundry to basically complete the ecosystem. Now, in terms of the challenges, I think there are two things, right? One thing is a product development and one thing is a product marketing and selling, right? So if you again take basically mobile phone, if it takes let's say about $20 million to develop a new mobile phone, it might take $50 million to market it also, right? Because that's a consumer product, you need to create brands, you need to create basically your sales channel, supply chain, and all of those things, right? So I think we need to address both the challenge that basically either through government support or through basically industry support, we provide optimal funding and support for product development, as well as basically provide the right avenues and right basically support system for creating market for basically these products, right? If you leave aside, let's say consumer products, right? There are a lot of local products get bought by the government.
Right.
Okay. So if the government procurement can be leveraged basically to help these companies which are initially going to be small companies, right? To find the initial market, I think that could be a big boost for these companies, and most of the countries have done it, right? Basically,
SBIR, for example, in the US.
US, DRDO, DARPA has basically helped so many companies basically in terms of coming up and so on and so forth. So wherever the government has basically procurement, and you see it's happening everywhere. Even China 2 weeks back said that we are not going to use Intel and AMD chips, and basically their public computer systems, right? So most of the countries do it. India cannot be basically same as everybody else, but wherever in a very fair commercial manner these companies can be supported, I think that will be beneficial for basically development of these products.
It surprises me you say that because driving around Bangalore, I've been here for a few days, and you see a lot of Hindustan Aeronautical, you see the defense, I saw things for aviation, for aerospace, all technology divisions, very heavily secure establishments. There's a lot of that in Bangalore, and it's actually Bangalore's history has been built on HAL and all that. So isn't that possible to make that connect?
No, I think defense sector is already basically getting that support, right?
Okay.
I'm talking more about, let's say...
No, the other way around. So for example, there could be a lot more procurement from these HAL and the defense sector to help enable some of these startups.
Some of that has started happening, like Department of Defense has a program called IDEX, right, where they buy from the basically startups and so on and so forth. But I'm talking about things like, let's say, security and surveillance camera. Right. Now this is completely government purchase, right?
Correct.
Either local, city or state or central, right? Now, can we leverage that?
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, by basically promoting the local products, right?
So
in a fair manner, we cannot be just like very biased towards Indian products only, but in a fair manner, if we can give a chance, competitive nature, if we can give these companies at least a level playing field, right? And in some areas where the security is of basically concerned, then basically obviously you need to put some guard band around it so that basically you are not compromising the security. Those areas, I think there can be basically government procurement can certainly help basically the product ecosystem to come.
So, for example, are there enough embedded vision system development companies here to then service that?
Yeah, so those kind of thing, right? Things like, for example, UPI, right? Now UPI has become very
popular. It's a payment system in India.
UPI is a basically uniform payment interface, which is a digital payment system. Through your phone, basically you can pay any small amount or large amount. It has become very popular, and there are basically at least 200 million basically people at least are using it, right? Now, when you make a payment, there is a small device which says that basically this much payment is received, right? Now, these kind of the devices can be built in India, right, rather than importing from China and other countries, right? So that's how I'm saying that whatever basically applications areas are there, which are basically large population scale, right? I think they can be leveraged to build this product ecosystem, other than giving the financial assistance in terms of the product development cost and so on and so forth, right, for startups.
Now, there's one other big area, and that's related to what you're doing, is how do you develop the skills and the talent for this product development, and to have that vision to create sort of large, I don't know, companies like $100 million fabulous companies. It's not there, but it's all related to some of the programs you're doing and the lack of consistent education to do that.
Yeah. So, I think if we look at the Indian education system, right, probably about 20 years back we started a BTech level program called Electronics and Communication Engineering, right? Now the times have changed, okay? There are not that much basically opportunity in communication. So about 3 years back, a couple of us get together, Professor Ram Gopal Rao, who was the IIT Delhi director at that time, and myself, and we proposed to AICTE that it is time to start a basically new stream called Electronics and VLSI Design. Okay? Catering to basically growing semiconductor industry and manpower requirement in that thing. So in August 2022, AICTE, which is the apex body controlling the higher education, has approved basically a undergraduate program in electronics and VLSI design. Right? Now, over last 1.5 years, basically about 350 institutes have also decided to offer that program. Right? So I think that is good because I think when we were going to the college, probably we were not ready to absorb something like semiconductor or chip design, but today's kids are much more ready to absorb it at the BTech level itself, right? So that will create good number, quality and quantity of basically engineers in this direction, basically 3 to 4 years down the road when they graduate, right? And now to make this whole successful, we need to provide them the quality curriculum, which a lot of us have worked together, and also provide them basically access to the design tools which we call EDA tools from companies like Synopsys, Cadence, Siemens, so that basically they can learn design in a proper way, right? I think that is happening. Probably India has one of the largest program where almost 150 colleges are being provided EDA tools for free.
Yes.
Right?
So funded by the government.
By the government,
yeah.
Right? From the Ministry of IT, for basically making sure that these students, both at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, learn the chip design with basically commercially available and state-of-the-art tools, right? Plus basically new curriculum and all of those things. We are very hopeful that in basically 3 years from now, we will start seeing a new crop of the engineers which will be much more ready for serving both domestic need of the talent as well as the global need of the talent.
So finally, what do you see as the biggest thing that is happening in India right now to enable some of the vision that you've got?
So I think one thing which has changed in the last 4 years, right? In a layman's term, earlier when we used to meet somebody who is not from the domain, right? We will have to explain for 15 minutes what we do, yes. Right? Today we have to just say a word semiconductor and they understand what we do. So I think that's a big change basically at the common man level has happened. Secondly is that if you hear any of the basically important speeches by the political leaders, be it Prime Minister or External Affairs Minister or IT Minister, I think semiconductor has become a standard basically part of their talk, right? Yeah. Recently, I think External Affairs Minister was basically having an interview and said, what will be the two technologies which will define basically future 20 years down the road? He said space and semiconductors.
Space and semiconductors, yeah.
So I think that's the big change which has happened, and because of that basically the government policies, government understanding, and most important, government is listening. Even if something is not there, they are listening to the feedback by basically industry and people like us that what could be done, where is the potential, what are the basically changes in the policies need to be done. I think they are very much basically in the listening mode, and whatever basically is feasible and makes sense, that is quickly getting implemented, not that basically your input will be implemented 5 years down the road. If there is an input is sensible and it makes sense, it gets implemented within a quarter or so, right? So I think that's the big change which we see, the overall focus on basically electronics and semiconductor as a sector, as well as basically ability to listen and implement basically the policies which are going to help this sector.
Well, Satya, thank you very much.
Thank you.